The morning mist clings to the Anegawa River like a funeral shroud. It's July 30th, 1570, and 80 samurai stand in perfect silence, watching 2,000 warriors cross the water toward them. Their hands rest on katana hilts. Their breath is steady. They do not retreat. This is impossible mathematics. A slaughter written before the first blade is drawn. But in 16 minutes, this riverbank will run crimson with the lesson that numbers mean nothing when discipline meets desperation. The Ase and Asakura clans have allied against Oda Nobunaga, the rising warlord who threatens to unify Japan under his iron fist. 30,000 troops clash across this valley today, but our story focuses on one flank, one impossible stand that will become legend. The 80 samurai are Tokugawa Ieyasu's finest, veterans of a dozen campaigns. Men who've learned that survival demands perfect timing and absolute commitment. They've been ordered to hold the western ford. No reinforcements are coming. The math is simple. Delay the 2,000 long enough for Nobunaga's main force to break the Ase center. Survive or die, but do not yield. Across the river, the Asakura forces pause. They see the thin line of defenders. They see the impossible odds. Laughter ripples through their ranks. Why waste time on formation when overwhelming force will crush resistance in seconds? That miscalculation will cost them everything. The Asakura commander raises his war fan. 2,000 warriors surge forward, their battle cry drowning out the river's whisper. The water explodes into chaos as they charge through the shallows, spears raised, confident in their numerical supremacy. The 80 samurai don't move. They watch the distance close. 50 meters. 40, 30. Then, as one, they draw their blades. The sound cuts through the morning like a promise. They step forward into formation, not a line but a wedge. A spear point aimed at the heart of chaos. This is the Battle of Anegawa, and you're about to witness how 80 men turned suicide into legend. The 80 don't charge. That's the first surprise. While the Asakura mass crashes through the river like a tidal wave of steel and fury, Tokugawa's samurai hold their wedge formation, boots planted in the mud. They're counting heartbeats, measuring distance, waiting for the exact moment when momentum becomes liability. These aren't young men drunk on glory. The average age is 34. Every warrior has survived at least 5 major engagements. They've seen what happens when discipline breaks, when fear overrides training. They've watched friends die because someone moved too soon or too late. Their commander is Sakai Tadasugu, a man whose reputation was forged in the brutal campaigns of Mikawa province. He's fought outnumbered before. He knows the terrible arithmetic of battle. Position beats numbers, timing beats strength, and conviction beats everything. Tadasugu watches the Asakura ford the river. He notes their formation or lack thereof. They're bunched together, competing for space in the shallows, jostling for position. Officers are shouting contradictory orders. The disciplined advance has devolved into a race to reach the enemy first. Pride, the oldest weakness. Tadasugu raises his hand. Not yet. The river is 30 meters wide at the ford, but the current has carved the deepest channel directly through the center. The Asakura troops hit that channel and slow. Water rises to their chests. Armor becomes an anchor. For 5 critical seconds, they're vulnerable, off balance, weapons raised overhead, unable to defend. Tadasugu's hand drops. The wedge explodes forward. Not a charge, a calculated strike. The samurai move with perfect synchronization, covering the distance in seconds. They don't aim for the mass of enemies still crossing. They target the leading edge, the 50 warriors who've just cleared the water, still gasping, still finding their footing. The collision is surgical. The wedge point drives into the Asakura line like a blade piercing flesh. Katanas find gaps in armor with practiced precision. Men fall before they can raise their weapons. The front rank collapses. And suddenly, 2,000 warriors have a problem. Their strength, their overwhelming numbers, has become a trap. Those behind can't advance without trampling their own wounded. Those in the river can't retreat without drowning their comrades. The ford has become a killing ground. The samurai don't stop. The wedge pulls back 5 meters, resets, and strikes again. And again. Each impact calculated. each withdrawal disciplined. They're not fighting a battle. They're operating a machine designed to transform numerical advantage into catastrophic liability. The Asakura commanders realize their mistake 3 minutes too late. They're screaming new orders, trying to pull troops back from the ford, attempting to establish a proper formation on the far bank. But battle has its own momentum. Warriors who've charged across a river don't retreat without cause. Those at the front can't see the carnage. They only know their comrades ahead need support. So they keep coming. And the samurai keep killing. The wedge has shifted tactics now. Instead of striking and withdrawing, they've anchored themselves at the ford's exit point, the narrow strip of muddy bank where the river meets solid ground. It's a choke point barely 10 meters wide. Geography has become their ally. The Asakura can only attack in groups of 15 or 20 at a time. They emerge from the water exhausted, disoriented, immediately engaged by fresh samurai who've been waiting for precisely this moment. It's not combat, it's execution disguised as battle. But numbers are still numbers. For every Asakura warrior who falls, 3 more take his place. The samurai wedge begins to compress under the relentless pressure. Men are fighting back-to-back now, the formation tight enough that each warrior can feel his comrades breathing. Tadotsugu knows they can't hold this position much longer. The 80 are down to 74. Fatigue is setting in. Arms are heavy. Reactions are slowing. In another 5 minutes, exhaustion will accomplish what the Asakura army couldn't. Then the drums change. From across the valley, a new rhythm cuts through the chaos. The distinctive beat of Oda Nobunaga's war drums. The main force has broken through the Ase center. The entire enemy line is collapsing. The Asakura warriors at the ford hear it. They understand what it means. Their army is routed. They're fighting a delaying action that no longer serves any purpose. Morale doesn't crack. It shatters. The first warriors turn to flee. Then 10 more. Then 50. The rout becomes a stampede. Men are drowning in the river, pulled under by armor and panic. Others throw down their weapons, desperate to move faster. The samurai don't pursue. They stand at the ford's edge, watching the enemy dissolve into chaos, their katanas dark with the morning's work. 74 warriors, against 2,000, and the ford holds. Silence settles over the ford like falling ash. The Anegawa River runs dark now, carrying the evidence of the morning's mathematics downstream. 74 samurai stand among the debris of broken formations and discarded weapons. 6 of their brothers will never leave this riverbank. Their names will be remembered. Tadotsugu surveys his warriors. Some are wounded, shallow cuts, bruised ribs, nothing that will stop them from fighting again today. Others are unharmed but hollow-eyed, processing what they've just survived. The human mind wasn't designed to make sense of these odds. But there's no time for reflection. Across the valley, Nobunaga's main force is pursuing the routed Ase Asakura army. The battle continues. This was only one ford, one fragment of a conflict that will decide the future of central Japan. A messenger arrives, his horse lathered with sweat. New orders from Tokugawa Ieyasu himself. Advance and secure the Asakura supply camp. Destroy their provisions. Cut off any possibility of regrouping. The 74 look at each other. They've just survived the impossible. Now they're being asked to press the advantage, to transform survival into victory. Some men would refuse. These men prepare to move. Because that's the difference between soldiers and samurai. Soldiers fight until they can't. Samurai fight until their lord's objective is achieved or their body stops obeying commands. Exhaustion isn't a reason to stop. Fear isn't a reason to hesitate. The mission continues until completion or death. Tadotsugu gives the order. The formation shifts from wedge to column, a marching formation designed for speed. They leave the ford behind, moving toward the enemy camp with the same disciplined precision that saved their lives minutes ago. Behind them, the Anegawa River flows on, indifferent to the legend being forged on its banks. The water will run clear again by sunset. But the story of 80 men who became 74, who faced 2,000 and held their ground, will flow through Japanese history for centuries. The battle isn't over. The day has hours left to run. But the ford is secure, the enemy routed, and somewhere in the chaos of this July morning, the future of Japan shifted. One impossible stand at a time. The Asakura supply camp is chaos incarnate. Servants flee in every direction. Pack animals break their tethers, scattering provisions across muddy ground. A handful of rearguard warriors attempt to form a defensive line, but their hearts aren't in it. They've heard the drums. They know their army is shattered. The 74 samurai arrive like an approaching storm, methodical, inexorable, terrifying in their silence. No battle cries, no wasted energy. They simply advance through the camp with the same disciplined precision that held the ford. Resistance collapses in minutes. The rear guard throws down weapons and runs. Tadotsugu doesn't pursue. His orders were specific. Destroy supplies, not chase frightened men. The samurai set to work with brutal efficiency. Rice stores are scattered into the mud and trampled. Weapon racks are overturned, spears and naginata broken across stones. Medical supplies are burned. Everything that could sustain a regrouping army is methodically eliminated. But something bothers Tadotsugu. The camp is too small. The provisions insufficient for a force of 2,000. This isn't the main supply depot, it's a forward staging area, which means the real cache is elsewhere, probably deeper in Asakura territory. He's making this calculation when the counterattack hits. 300 Asakura warriors emerge from the treeline, not the panicked mob from the ford, but organized troops who've rallied under competent officers. They've heard about the ford massacre. They're not making the same mistakes. They don't charge blindly. They form a proper battle line, shields locked, spears leveled. They advance slowly, maintaining formation, cutting off the samurai's retreat route back to friendly lines. The mathematics have shifted again. 74 exhausted warriors, caught in an enemy supply camp, facing 300 fresh troops with tactical advantage and burning motivation. Tadotsugu's face shows nothing, but his hand moves to his katana grip, and every samurai in his command understands the gesture. They're not retreating, not surrendering, not asking for terms. They're going to fight their way out or die in the attempt. The mission continues. Always, the Asakura line advances. The samurai form a defensive circle among the burning supplies. And the afternoon descends into the grinding horror of close-quarters combat where exhaustion fights discipline and desperation battles training. This is where legends are truly forged, not in glorious charges, but in the brutal seconds when survival demands more than the body can give. The first clash tells Tadotsugu everything he needs to know. These aren't the disorganized warriors from the ford. These are veterans, the kind who've learned from battlefield mistakes, who understand that discipline beats fury every time. The Asakura shield wall advances in synchronized steps. Spears probe for openings. When samurai strike back, the shields absorb the impact and the line holds. It's textbook warfare, the kind taught in 1,000 training grounds across Japan. But textbooks don't account for men who've already survived the impossible once today. The samurai circle contracts, warriors pressing shoulder to shoulder. They're not trying to break the Asakura line. They're creating a formation so dense that superior numbers can't exploit gaps that don't exist. It's suffocating, claustrophobic combat where breath comes in gasps and every movement must be calculated to the centimeter. An Asakura spear thrust penetrates the circle. A samurai falls, his katana clattering to the mud. The number drops to 73, then 72. The mathematics are grinding against them again. Tadotsugu makes a decision that will be debated by military scholars for centuries. Instead of holding the defensive circle until it collapses, he orders a breakout, not toward friendly lines, but deeper into enemy territory, toward the treeline the Asakura emerged from. It's madness. It violates every tactical principle. You don't advance when surrounded. You don't charge toward unknown terrain when your escape route is in the opposite direction. But Tadotsugu has read the battlefield correctly. The Asakura formed their line to cut off retreat. Their entire formation is oriented toward blocking the path back to Tokugawa lines. They're not prepared for an enemy that attacks the direction they came from. The samurai wedge reforms, smaller now, tighter, but still perfectly coordinated. They drive forward with everything they have left. The collision with the Asakura flank is apocalyptic. Men fall on both sides. The formation pierces through. And suddenly they're in the trees, in broken terrain where formation doesn't matter and individual skill decides survival. The Asakura advantage evaporates. In the forest, 72 desperate samurai become 72 individual nightmares hunting through shadows. The hunters have become the hunted. And the Asakura warriors, for the first time today, understand what true fear feels like. The forest becomes a maze of violence and shadow. Samurai move through the trees like predators, using terrain that negates numerical advantage. An Asakura warrior rounds a tree and finds a katana waiting. Another stumbles over roots and never rises. The forest floor becomes treacherous with obstacles that exhausted men can't navigate. But the samurai are exhausted too. Adrenaline can only sustain the body for so long before biology demands payment. Warriors are stumbling now, reaction slowing, vision narrowing to tunnel focus. Several collapse against trees, muscles simply refusing commands. The count drops. 70, 68, 65. Tadotsugu realizes they can't win this fight. They can only survive it. And survival means escaping the forest before the Asakura reorganize and surround them completely. He signals the retreat, a tactical withdrawal deeper into the woods, away from the supply camp, away from the enemy concentration. The samurai break contact and melt into the forest's depths. Behind them, Asakura officers are screaming orders, trying to organize pursuit. But their warriors are spooked. They've lost dozens of men to an enemy they can barely see. The shadows themselves seem hostile. The pursuit is half-hearted at best. Within minutes, the samurai have disappeared completely. They emerge from the treeline 2 hours later, 5 kilometers from where they entered. 62 warriors remain. 12 left behind in the forest. 6 at the ford. 18 brothers who will never see sunset. But they're alive. Against impossible odds, against numerical superiority, against exhaustion and injury and the simple mathematics of warfare, they've survived. The mission is incomplete, the main supply depot remains intact somewhere, but they've disrupted enemy logistics and killed hundreds. A scout meets them with news. Nobunaga has won. The Asakura alliance is shattered. The enemy is in full retreat across the entire battlefield. The Battle of Anegawa is over. The 62 samurai hear this news in silence. Some sit down heavily, finally allowing their bodies to acknowledge exhaustion. Others stand motionless, processing survival. A few weep quietly for the fallen. Tadotsugu looks at his warriors. These men who held a ford against 2,000, who fought through an ambush, who survived the forest's grinding horror. He sees the future shoguns and legends. He sees the living embodiment of samurai ideals. He sees brothers who answered when called and gave everything asked. History remembers the Battle of Anegawa for Nobunaga's strategic victory. The military academies study his flanking maneuvers and his coordination with Tokugawa forces. The scrolls record the thousands who fell and the alliance that shattered. But the warriors who were there remember something else. They remember the ford. Word spreads through the Tokugawa camp before sunset. 80 samurai, now 62, held off 2,000 Asakura troops long enough for Nobunaga's main assault to succeed. The story grows with each telling. By nightfall, it's become legend. By dawn, it's become mythology. Tokugawa Ieyasu himself walks among the survivors. He's a man who will one day unify all of Japan, who will establish a shogunate lasting 2.5 centuries. But tonight, he's simply a commander honoring warriors who exceeded every possible expectation. He stops before Tadotsugu. No words are exchanged. The bow Ieyasu gives is slight, a gesture of respect between equals. Tadotsugu returns it. In that moment, a bond is forged that will shape Japanese history. These men, this core of disciplined warriors, will become the foundation of Tokugawa's future power. The strategic importance of the ford becomes clear in the days following. Had the Asakura succeeded in crossing, they would have flanked Nobunaga's main force, potentially turning victory into catastrophic defeat. The entire campaign, the unification of central Japan, balanced on that narrow strip of riverbank. 80 men changed the course of history, not through grand strategy or political maneuvering, but through absolute commitment to an impossible order. Military historians will debate the tactics for centuries. How did such a small force hold against overwhelming numbers? The answer isn't complex. Perfect discipline, superior positioning, and the willingness to die rather than yield. Simple principles brutally executed. But there's something else, something harder to quantify in tactical manuals. It's the alchemy that transforms soldiers into legends. The moment when training and discipline fuse with desperation and brotherhood to create something that transcends normal human capability. The samurai at Anegawa found that threshold and crossed it. They discovered that impossible is just a word, that mathematics means nothing when will refuses to break, that 80 determined men can indeed stop 2,000. That lesson echoes through history. It whispers in every desperate stand, every impossible defense, every moment when the few hold against the many. The ford remembers, the river remembers, and Japan remembers. The days following Anegawa see the alliance's complete dissolution. The Ase clan retreats to their castle at Odani, pursued by Nobunaga's forces. The Asakura withdraw to their mountain strongholds in Ekizan province. The coalition that threatened Nobunaga's ambitions is broken, scattered, no longer capable of coordinated resistance. But the cost is staggering. Over 4,000 warriors lie dead across the Anegawa Valley. The river valley becomes a mass grave, bodies buried in trenches as Buddhist monks chant sutras for the fallen. The smoke from funeral pyres darkens the sky for 3 days. Among the dead are the 18 samurai from Tadatsugu's command. Their bodies are recovered from the ford and the forest, treated with the honor befitting warriors who held the line. Each receives individual cremation. Their ashes return to families who will treasure them as sacred relics. The surviving 62 receive recognition that will follow them for life. They're given lands, increased stipends, positions of honor within the Tokugawa military structure. More importantly, they're given something no amount of gold can buy: the unshakable knowledge that when tested absolutely, they did not break. Tadatsugu is promoted to senior commander. His tactical decisions at the ford become case studies taught to future generations of samurai. The concept of using terrain to negate numerical advantage, of striking at the moment when enemy strength becomes weakness, these lessons will influence Japanese military doctrine for centuries. But for the 62, the real legacy isn't tactical. It's personal. They know something most warriors never learn: the exact limit of human endurance, the precise point where discipline overcomes biology, where training defeats exhaustion. They've touched that boundary and returned. They've seen what lies beyond the edge of human capability, and they carry that knowledge like invisible armor for the rest of their lives. Years later, when Tokugawa Ieyasu establishes his shogunate and brings peace to Japan, many of these 62 will be there, older, grayer, but still carrying themselves with the unmistakable bearing of men who held a ford against impossible odds. They'll tell their grandchildren about July 30th, 1570, about the morning mist on the Anegawa River, about 80 warriors who became a legend, about the day mathematics failed and will triumphed. And those grandchildren will pass the story forward, generation after generation, until the legend becomes immortal. Today, the Anegawa River flows peacefully through Shiga Prefecture. Tourists visit the battlefield site, now peaceful farmland dotted with memorial stones. The water runs clear over the same ford where 80 samurai changed history. Local historians maintain the records. They know the names of the 18 who fell. They preserve the accounts written by survivors. They guard the story against the erosion of time and the distortion of mythology. Because the truth is more powerful than any legend. The Battle of Anegawa was a turning point in the Sengoku period, the age of warring states that tore Japan apart for over a century. Nobunaga's victory began the unification process that would eventually bring peace. The ford action, seemingly minor in the battle's grand scope, proved critical to that victory. But the legacy transcends tactics and strategy. The stand at Anegawa became a philosophical touchstone for the samurai class. It embodied the core principles they aspired to: discipline over emotion, duty over survival, brotherhood over individual glory. Military academies across Japan still study Tadatsugu's decisions. How he used terrain, how he timed his strikes, how he maintained discipline in chaos. The ford has become a masterclass in defensive warfare, taught alongside Thermopylae and other legendary stands. Yet perhaps the deepest legacy is personal. The 62 survivors never spoke of glory or heroism. In their later writings, they describe only duty fulfilled, orders obeyed, brothers honored. They frame the impossible as simply what was required. That humility became as legendary as the stand itself. Modern Japan has changed beyond recognition from the world those warriors knew. Samurai are gone. Feudal lords are gone. The entire social structure they fought to preserve has vanished into history. But the principle they embodied remains. When faced with impossible odds, when the mathematics say defeat is certain, when every rational calculation screams surrender, there exists a human capacity to simply refuse. To stand, to hold, to fight until the body fails or the mission succeeds. 80 warriors at a ford, 2,000 invaders, impossible mathematics. And the day mathematics lost, that story doesn't fade. It doesn't diminish. It flows through history like the Anegawa itself, constant, clear, eternal. Some legends are built on exaggeration. This one is built on documented truth. And that makes it far more powerful. The ford remembers, always,